These are the first set of notes for Module 1A, and the first three terms we are going to talk about are undefined terms. And the first one is a point, and it has a specific location. It has no dimension, and it is represented by a dot. This is how we see it in a picture, and for the symbol we just write point P. For the second one, we have a line, and a line, it has connecting a straight path. A line has no thickness, and it continues forever in both directions or in opposite directions. What a line will look like is going to be like this with at least 2 points on it. We're going to call this line L, and you have to make sure you have a couple points labeled. So a couple symbols that we can write it as, we can call this line L, line AB, or you can also switch that around and call it line BA, but most of the times you're going to see it as AB with the symbol of a line above it. And you could also see it as BA with the symbol above it. Those are the most common ways you will see a line written. The third one is a plane, and a plane is a flat surface. And it has no thickness, just like a line, but it extends forever in all directions. An example for a plane could be like your desktop, because it's a flat surface, but think of it if it extended in all directions, so it was a never-ending desktop. So the way that you see a picture of a plane is usually with a capital letter, and then you need at least 3 non-collinear dots or points. For the symbols of how to write it, an example could be plane R, because that's the capital letter, or you could use the 3 non-collinear points. You could say plane XYZ. You could also mix around those letters, so YXZ or ZYX, any of those combinations would work. Now going on to our defined terms, we have collinear, and collinear means that we have points that lie on the same line. A way to remember that would be we have the word linear as part of our word, plus you have the co right in front of it, so they share the same line. What this would look like in our picture is we would have a line that we have multiple points that are on that line. So our points L, M, and N are collinear. And that's how you would see it being described. Coplanar then, if you kind of take that same hint of how it's set up, we have the word co in front and then planar. So we have points or lines that lie in the same plane. When we're looking at our picture, we would just see a plane with at least a couple different things on there. So we could say that points R, S, and T are coplanar. We have talked about what a line is. So now with a line segment or just a segment is a portion or just a section of a line consisting of at least 2 points. We call those 2 points endpoints. And our segment, it's the portion of that line, but it contains everything between those 2 points. And a segment has a beginning and an end. So if we had the arrows at the end over here, that would show it keeps on going, and then it would be a line. But because it stops from C to D, that's a segment. So we could call this segment CD or segment DC. But usually we write it without the word segment in front of it, and then it would be CD with literally a little mini segment above it, or DC, because you can always switch around the letters, again with the segment above it. So notice that it is different than the way that we write a line, because a line, we use arrows at the ends, but with a segment, there are no arrows at the end, and that's a big difference between those two symbols. All right, so this next one is a ray. An array is just a portion of a line because it does continue on in one direction forever, but there is also an end point. This is what our picture looks like. So notice the point P is our end point. Point Q, our line keeps on going, our array keeps on going through that point Q, so it keeps on going towards the right. The way that we're going to write this, then we can put the word ray, PQ, or with the symbol PQ, notice it starts at point P and the arrow goes through point Q. So when we write it, it needs to start at point Q and go through, our arrow portion will be above our Q. If we switch our letters around, so it would be QP, then we still make sure it starts at point P and the arrow still is above the point Q. So it does make a big difference on which direction your arrow will go. Next will be opposite rays. So we have 2 rays that form a straight line, and they share a common endpoint. So when we're drawing one, it would start at point, say we were going to start at G and go through point H, but I need to make sure that my other ray will start at point G and continue in the opposite direction. So together it makes a straight line. So this would be called GF and GH are opposite rays. Now for the ray portion of it, we start at point G and goes through the H. So I need to start at point G and the arrow goes over the H. For the GF, it starts at point G and the arrow is over the F. So that's the way that we need to write it as well. Next, for the intersection of two lines, we have two lines that intersect at exactly only one point. A symbol for intersection is this upside down capital U. So sometimes you could always see that. So what this could look like for the intersection of two lines, we need to draw two lines. And they need to intersect. There's only one point that it can intersect at. So my line AB, remember the symbol for line is with our two arrows at the top of it. And our line CD, same with the two lines above it, intersect at point E. If we have the intersection of two planes, that will be exactly one line is how they intersect each other. This is one that is a little bit more difficult to picture in your head. So picture a book binding and all of your pages in your textbook or a book are the planes. So think of where do all those pages intersect? They intersect at the binding. And the binding, the shape of the binding is a line. So here's my picture of what this will look like. So there is a picture of one of the planes, and my blue shape is the shape of another plane, and where they all intersect is that purple line down the center. So plane S and plane T intersect at line AB. Notice when I wrote the line AB, I say line AB, but I write it as the symbol AB with my little line above it. So make sure you have both of the arrows on there. Now remember, these last terms on here are the defined terms, so they actually have definitions. This means that when you have some vocabulary words, that you need to make sure you remember what those vocabulary words and the definitions will be, because you're going to see these throughout the school year. Plus, you will be asked these on quizzes and tests coming up.